Welcome to Monet Cafe for this very colorful combination of mediums. I'm using pastel combined with gouache paint to create this lovely little pot of flowers. This is a partial tutorial. The full version is on my Patreon page as part of a series called 12 Days of Healing, where I'll be painting for 12 days, providing lessons during this challenging time in our world. And you're welcome to become a patron if you like. For $5 a month, you can cancel at any time, or you can just continue the free lessons here in Monet Cafe. I've had this set of gouache paint that Arteza has given me for a while, and this was a great opportunity to work with my daughter-in-law. There she is, little cutie pie. She was such a great assistant. We actually cataloged all 60 colors in this set. Again, Arteza gives me these complimentary so that I'll share them in my videos, and it's really great to get these products. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about this, but I will have a separate video, very in-depth video on this particular set of gouache paints and all about gouache paints. So stay tuned for that upcoming video. Also too, subscribe to my channel and click that little bell icon and you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. Now this will be the speed version of this video here on Monet Cafe, not sped up too awfully much. And I will provide some commentary here at the beginning, but the full version again is on my Patreon page as part of a wonderful 12 Days of Healing painting challenge that we're doing, and we're all sharing our work together. That's another neat thing about the Patreon group. But again, I say this all the time, I always will continue to bring, as long as I'm able, Lord willing, to bring free videos to Monet Cafe, because I know there are many people who have no access to art instruction. And you know, I really started Monet Cafe because I was in the same position. I wasn't as financially or time-wise able to go get art instruction, and I had kids, and you know how that goes. So this is really a great resource for people who are wanting to get back into something creative and have a leaning towards painting or you know, drawing. And so this is a neat way and a neat resource for me to provide for others. So I want to explain a little bit about what I'm doing here. This is watercolor paper. Now gouache paint, it looks like watercolor, right? And one neat thing about gouache paint, similar to watercolor, is that you can squeeze it out of the tube like I've done in this little Arteza. It's called a watercolor palette. You buy it with empty little tins or bins inside of it, and they're movable, so you can take them out and move them around. But you know, you fill it up with watercolor or gouache, because both of those mediums are okay to let them dry, and you just wet your brush with water and they, you know, pick up the paint again. So that's a really neat thing about gouache, and it behaves a lot like watercolor, but there's one major difference. It's opaque, meaning it's not translucent. You notice the color that I just put down there, it looks almost like acrylic paint, whereas if I'd have used watercolor there, it would have been more luminous. The paper would have shone through more. So that's an inherent wonderful thing about watercolor, is its luminosity, but it is disadvantaged in that you have to work light to dark, and you have to preserve your lights, because once you lose that white of the paper, you can't really get that back yet. So you're constantly working at that, and that all gets better. The more you do it, you just get used to it, and it's no big deal. But if you come from other mediums like acrylic or oil or even pastel, sometimes that's a little tricky. But gouache paint behaves very much like acrylic paint in that you can layer light over it. So you can go back and add highlights and lighter values. Now even like with acrylic paint, you have to be kind of careful with that too. Often if I know I want something really bright, like some flowers or whatever, I'm not going to put a dark down if I really want to keep them luminous. But let me explain a little bit about what I'm doing here. After I did the sketch of these flowers, and I do have the reference photo of this on my Patreon page, but you could find any little pot of flowers to recreate this. But why am I choosing these colors? I'll tell you, in the reference photo, these were not the colors. The sky or the background was really white, almost like it was a white wall behind it, and the tabletop was kind of a light blue. And what I'm doing with the gouache, this is called an underpainting. I'm going to be applying pastel on top of this. But what I'm doing with the gouache is I'm putting down colors, because I know I'm going to put pastels on top of it, that will make a great base for the colors I have in my mind and the values, the lightness or darkness that I have in my mind. Because, I mean, if I'd have left that white of the paper behind the vase, or I'd have painted a really light color and then I'd glazed with the pastel on top of that, it would have been kind of boring. So I purposely put down a darker and a little bit of a warmer, kind of in between a warm and a cool value there with that kind of mauve color, pinkish mauve color, because I knew I wanted to create the sky to be a little bit yellow, a little bit sunny, and that's going to make a great base for when I glaze the pastel on top of that. The same with the tabletop. It's darker than I want it, but I know I'm going to glaze a kind of a light blue pastel over it, medium value blue, and make some shadows. And the pot, I knew the pot was a terracotta pot, and it was orange. You know, terracotta pots are orange. It also had some of that lovely moss growing on it. But a complement to orange, if I'd have painted this orange with gouache and then put orange pastel on top of it, there would have been no interesting play of color. And it's really neat when you do an underpainting to try to think about the complements of what your final painting will be. And a complement, all that means is it's the color opposite on the color wheel. So if your pot's going to be orange, just look across the color wheel. The complement, the opposite, would be green. So it makes it a great underpainting color to put down with things like that. And I talk about underpaintings all the time. I've got plenty of videos on underpaintings. By the way, I have my videos categorized into playlists. If you're thinking about, oh, where's her videos on color theory? Just go to the tab up on my channel, Monet Cafe, look for playlist, you'll find plenty. Now, I'm working with the gouache now in the mass of foliage, and notice that I did a darker green. It's really like a teal green. I know I'm going to be putting a lot of warm greens on the leaves, so that's why I didn't use warm greens here. I'm going to be adding that with pastel, so I chose to use more of a cool green, but I'm putting the darks in more where they would be, which would be at the opening of that vase. They're kind of all jammed together, growing out, clustered together. So, and as they reach out, the values, the lightness or the darkness, gradually get lighter as they get to the tips. You know, just, you know, it's common sense, really. You know, they're not as crammed. And so I'm just getting in kind of the basic values for this. See how I left the little whites there for some of the flowers? The flowers in the middle there were mostly pansies, and they were a really pretty purple, kind of a dark purple, but I left them blank, and I knew I was going to color in interesting color to be a background for that. Now, some of the flowers on the edges were actually kind of reddish, almost like a reddish pink, and I thought this yellow would make a nice base for those flowers. So again, as you watch this painting, I'm just going to do commentary here on the gouache part, and then you can watch the painting come to life and perhaps remember some of the things I've said about why I chose the colors that I did for interesting base to put the pastels on top of. All right, so I'm doing a little bit of these orangey yellows, and later I'll apply the reds and the pinks. And then I'm going to apply for the pansies. I'll go ahead and talk before I do it. I'm going to apply a beautiful magenta. The pansies were, in the photo, they were mostly bluish purple with the little yellow centers that are so pretty. So I chose to do a magenta as a base to layer the pansies on top of. Here comes that magenta right now. All right, so enjoy the rest of this. Oh, let me add too, you're going to see me after I get these gouache paints down and they dry. How am I going to apply the pastel? This is watercolor paper, and pastel doesn't really adhere to watercolor paper all that well. So what I'm going to be doing, if you've watched my videos a lot, you know I've done this technique multiple times, where this is a great way to save money because pastel papers can get expensive. So you can use watercolor paper. You can do a watercolor underpainting like I'm doing here, or a gouache underpainting. Or you can just tone your paper, your watercolor paper. If you want like a beautiful orange, you can just paint it orange Then let it dry, and you can apply this product, you'll see in just a minute, called clear gesso. And you don't want to use regular gesso. Gesso is usually what you use to coat your canvases as an artist. You kind of treat them, and it kind of protects them and gets them ready for the oil paint or acrylic paint. But clear gesso is the product you want to use, because there's something in clear gesso. It's like a little grit, almost like sand. And here it comes. When you put it down and it dries, it creates a little gritty surface, and the pastels have something to hold on to. The regular gesso, I did 2 coats, by the way, letting them dry in between. Regular gesso does not have that grit. Also, regular gesso is not clear. So if you apply it to this, you're going to lose your whole underpainting you just worked so hard to do. So, all right, so here you're going to see the gesso did lighten everything a little bit, which was fine with me. And now I'm applying that little bit of almost like a dull light yellow, not too light, but it just kind of subdued that kind of mauve color that I had, and make just a nice little artistic background. Also too, the gesso, when you apply it with a brush like this, it makes for a really nice textured surface that to me kind of inherently lends itself towards looking impressionistic. Now watch how I do the tabletop. I gradually lighten it up. I even lighten it up more later. I'm not sure if I do it now, but you're going to see me just applying color on top of this to transform what I've already laid down with the gouache. So gouache is a great product. You need to kind of practice and play around with it. Again, keep an eye out for that gouache product review I'm going to do for the Arteza products. They're so nice to send me free product if I put it in the videos. So, and they have multiple other products too they're very affordable. They're all what's called archival, very safe to use. They'll never yellow. They don't have any acid in them or whatever, so they're very safe for long-term use. Some of them are not what's considered artist quality, but they're very professional quality. So, I mean, to me anyway, for my purposes, I usually cover them up with pastels anyway. So enjoy this. I'm gonna try to keep taking even the Patreon videos that I make and giving you guys a little sample of it, and hope you learn. And also too, you can always join our Facebook group, Monet Cafe Art Group on Facebook, if you'd like to get a little bit more input into your art, share your own creations. We have just, oh my gosh, close to 10,000 members on there, and some very professional artists and lots of just brand new artists. So don't ever feel shy about that. It is a private group. You have to ask to join, but you don't have to feel bad about sharing your work. It's not going out to the world. It's just going to a select group of artists. All right, guys, enjoy, and please feel free to comment, and please subscribe if you haven't already. And stay tuned to the end of this video. I give a little extra commentary. now this painting is getting close to being done. Notice I add the little yellows to the centers of the pansies. I'm adding a little bit more of the teals and kind of that grassy green. I did speed this up a bit more, but you can see I'm keeping it all very light and airy. A little bit of the orangey reds. And notice here how I use this lighter pastel that I used to glaze over at the beginning, the background. I use it kind of like sky holes to carve in to the leaves and the flowers to give it a little bit more of an airy feeling. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little pastel combined with gouache demonstration for a happy little painting. I pray it brings you some joy, and I also pray everyone is safe and well during this challenge in our world. So hang in there, guys, and happy painting.